Hello everyone, and welcome to the tutorial for Audioscape 2.0. This will be a bit of a demo for anyone who's used Audioscape in the past. A few things have changed. The 2.0 version is a API breaking version, so if you have any custom scripts that interface with Audioscape, you will need to update those to use this new version. I think it's been 6 years, a little over 6 years actually, since Audioscape was first released. So I figured it was time, with the changes in Unity and my increased experience, to kind of rewrite this from scratch, make things a little more efficient, and add a few convenience features while I was at it. So without further ado, I guess I'll jump into this, and we can look at some of what you get in the package. There's an Umbra Evolution folder. That's where I put all of my assets. Within that, there's a general folder that has code that's used between all my assets, some custom attributes and that sort of thing. Some of them you might find useful yourself. There's also the Audioscape folder. It's got this demo scene that you see here, some editor scripts, an example prefab that we'll go into a bit later, the meat and potatoes scripts, and one data class that's used for some settings. To get started, all you have to do is go to Tools, Umbra Evolution, Audioscape, and create Audioscape Manager. Alternatively, you can just add the Audioscape Manager component to an object in the scene. Note that there can only be one of those in any given scene to manage all of the audioscapes. It has a master volume slider that will multiply itself with some other volume settings to change the volume of all of the audioscapes at once. You can also select an individual audioscape, rename them. If we see here, that'll rename it in the hierarchy as well. Change the gizmo colors, or delete one outright. You can also create a brand new audioscape and validate audioscape clip players. This button is important because in previous versions of Audioscape, everything was hierarchy based. So anything that was a child of an audioscape would be managed by that audioscape. Now you can add your own custom objects and make them children of the audioscape. And the clip players can actually be removed from the audioscape and put wherever you'd like. I put them in there for organizational purposes, but now they maintain a reference to their parent audioscape, as you can see right here, no matter where they are. But if you're doing some custom scripting or playing around with stuff and you happen to delete an audioscape, these become orphaned and they don't have a parent audioscape reference anymore. This will just search audioscape clip players, make sure they all have valid references and settings, and anything that doesn't pass the validation test will be cleaned up from the scene. Let's get that forest audioscape back and generate some audioscape clip players there. That's about all there is to the manager. So if we look at an actual audioscape, like I said, you can create one by clicking here or going to Tools, Umbra Evolution, Audioscape, Create Audioscape. An audioscape has a few settings. You'll see a checkbox here is active. This is mostly for debugging and learning purposes. If it's checked, that means the audioscape is free to have its clips play and move around and do all of the things it normally does. If this is unchecked, that means the audioscape is paused. Again, you have a volume slider here, and this volume slider only applies to the clips within the audioscape itself. You have a box, and this is a new feature for people who have used this asset before, to activate on trigger. Essentially, this gates the audioscape based on the presence of a player object within the trigger zone. Depending on the shape and settings of the audioscape, I generate a box collider or a sphere collider that's the same shape as the audioscape. When on-trigger enter is called, the audioscape becomes active. When on-trigger exit is called, the audioscape becomes inactive. Ideally, you'd probably put your audioscapes on some sort of player detection layer, and then have your player on its own layer to prevent random objects and other things from triggering the audioscapes. There's also a distance optimization, so it looks for the audio listener in your scene. If that audio listener is too far away from the audioscape, then the audioscape is disabled, and if the listener is close enough, then the audioscape becomes active. Values of 0 or -1 are essentially infinite distance, so the same as having this unchecked. Now if I increase this a little bit, the test player's way up here, not close enough to the audioscape. But if I increase this, then you'll see the flag gets checked because the audio listener in the scene is close enough to the audioscape to trigger it. You can also, as I've demonstrated, change the shape of the audioscape between a box or sphere. Spheres have a radius. Boxes have this vector 3 to determine their shape. We can modify the gizmo color here as well as with the manager. And there are 2 flags here for regenerating the audioscape when awake is called or when start is called. You can also do it in both calls, although that's just kind of a waste of resources because it will delete any of the clips that are managed by the audioscape, repopulate them, and replace them. It's the same thing as pressing this button, essentially. One reason you might want to use one of these is because then you don't have to remember to regenerate the audioscape when you change the settings, and it will automatically do it for you at runtime. You may want to leave these unchecked if you have some static sounds, which we'll get into, because you don't want to delete them and move them. So that brings us to audioscape clips. You can add a number of clips to the audioscape with various settings. So I have this Fox clip here. The name is for organizational purposes mainly. You'll see the name appear up here. And it'll update in real time for you. Now, one big change from previous versions, in older versions, you basically set every setting that an audio source would have. Now I've relegated all of that to a prefab. So that's this example prefab I was talking about before. This is the most basic implementation of this prefab. And you can create any number of these prefabs and then just drop them into this slot here. You can set your 3D or 2D sound as appropriate, your reverb zone mix, pitch, stereo pan, 3D sound settings, all of that. A couple things that will be, and your output mixer group, all of that sort of thing. So the clips will be controlled by the audioscape. Play on awake and loop will be controlled by the audioscape. Well, technically they won't be controlled by the audioscape. It won't mess with these prefabs at all. Whatever you set is the law. But I recommend leaving these unchecked because the audioscape will attempt to control playback of its clips. Volume is also controlled by the audioscape. So I mentioned that there's a master volume, audioscape volume. There's also a clip volume. And when these 3 values are multiplied together, that sets the actual volume of the audio source. So kind of useful if you're not using mixer groups or if there's a particular sound you want to tweak because it's a little bit too loud and you want to rebalance it without having to use an external audio program. That's a tool you have at your disposal. The main purpose of these prefabs, though, is one, and these are the 2 required components, by the way. You need an audioscape clip player and an audio source. But the main purpose is so that you can set up 2D or 3D sounds as you see fit, and so that you can add specialized components for spatialized audio, for VR and things like that, and other additional components that you may want to have on your audio sources that you need for your particular project. You can set that up however you need without me dictating, how this should be set up. The audio clips will give you some variation on sounds. So I might want, let's say, 3 foxes is essentially what I'm simulating here. I want 3 foxes in the scene. I want them to move around and maybe do some yips. But I might want some variant yips. So I might have 3 different clips that can be played randomly. Number in audioscape is pretty self-explanatory. That's how many of these sources are populated in the audioscape. Min and max time between plays, again, pretty explanatory. A clip will play and it'll wait a minimum of 15 seconds and a maximum of 30 seconds to play in this particular setup. Static placement is a box you can check so that any of these Fox clips won't move. If I check this, they won't move around the audioscape. So normally when a clip is done playing or when it starts playing, it will move to a new position within the Audioscape. Checking this means they won't move at all, but they will continue to play at regular intervals. We can also generate the Audioscape until we get sort of a distribution that we want, or to reflect any changes that we make. Oh, you see we have a few more foxes there. Let's put that back to 3. The main purpose for static sounds, I think, I've done a few in this hallway Audioscape here, is let's say I want to have 2 pipes that maybe have some steam coming out of them, and I want to play these sounds from a very specific spot. I can hand position them wherever I want and just mark them as static so that they don't move around when they play. So I'm going to turn on this trigger here so you can kind of see how some of this works. We will get some messages in the console just because I don't have any audio clips set up for these players. So we're going to get some errors saying, hey, what are you doing? You don't have a clip for me to play, which is to be expected. But I didn't want to bloat this with some example sounds, and I don't have the rights to any audio clips anyway, any good ones. But if we play this, you'll see some things kind of move around in these in this zone here. Because I've told the forest to activate on trigger, right now it's disabled because the player isn't in it. And if the player moves in, now the forest is active, these sounds will start to play. Now the way this works when something is active and then it goes inactive is that anything that was playing will continue to finish playing out a specific sound. So you don't get any sounds that cut off abruptly, sort of mid, like if the fox is yelping, it doesn't cut off mid-yelp. The yelps will finish, and then they won't play again, is kind of how this works, just to make everything as smooth of a transition as possible. Well, I think that's everything I have for you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on the website, umbraevolution.com, in the contact form, or through email, umbraevolution@gmail.com. And if you have any feature requests or bug reports, please reach out through those channels and I'll try to get them sorted out. All right, have a good one.